The room was quiet but not calm. A single remark, delivered with a faint smile, would soon unravel months of preparation and expose how power, language, and arrogance collide behind closed diplomatic doors. This is a documentary-style reconstruction of a fictional negotiation, one that felt routine to one side and deeply consequential to the other. What happened next challenged assumptions about English intelligence and who truly controls a narrative. The setting was Geneva, chosen for neutrality, discretion, and symbolism. Delegations arrived from across Asia and Europe to finalize a multilateral infrastructure and maritime cooperation agreement. Among them was a senior British diplomat, widely respected in policy circles, known for sharp wit and an uncompromising negotiation style. Across the table sat the Filipino delegation, calm, methodical, and underestimated from the moment they spoke. The Filipino lead negotiator, Ambassador Rafael de la Cruz, spoke English with a cadence shaped by history. His syntax was precise, his vocabulary formal, but his accent carried traces of Manila, Madrid, and Washington. To seasoned linguists, it was a product of layered colonial and post-colonial education. To the British diplomat, Sir Andrew Wickham, it sounded, in his private assessment, unsophisticated. Wickham had built his career on linguistic dominance. Educated at elite British institutions, he believed English was not just a tool, but a hierarchy. Native fluency, in his view, equaled authority. During early sessions, he leaned back while de la Cruz spoke, exchanging glances with aides, occasionally interrupting to clarify points already clear. The imbalance was subtle, but intentional. The first turning point came during a side discussion on legal terminology. De la Cruz used a phrase common in Philippine diplomatic English, technically correct, but uncommon in British usage. Wickham smirked. He said they would need plainer English, lightly, loud enough for the room to hear. A few delegates chuckled. The Filipino team remained silent. To observers, it seemed minor. In reality, it was recorded. Every session was transcribed, every tone noted. For the Filipino delegation, language was not just communication. It was strategy. English was their working language, but not their source of legitimacy. That came from preparation, data, and leverage. And unlike Wickham, they were negotiating with more than words. Behind the scenes, the agreement was fragile. The Philippines controlled access points critical to new maritime trade routes. British-backed corporations needed favorable terms. Delays would cost billions. Wickham believed pressure and confidence would secure concessions. He underestimated how carefully the Filipino side had mapped each clause, each dependency, each timeline. What looked like politeness was restraint. As negotiations progressed, Wickham's tone sharpened. He corrected pronunciation. He rephrased Filipino statements as if translating. At one point, he joked about colonial English habits that never quite evolve. The room grew colder. Other delegations noticed a shift. The Filipinos responded only with requests for clarification, technical, calm, and increasingly specific. Those requests slowed everything. Each clarification forced legal review. Each review triggered delays. Wickham grew visibly irritated. He complained they were getting lost in semantics. De la Cruz replied evenly that language defines obligation and precision protects all parties. It was a statement that passed unnoticed by most, but not by the legal teams quietly recalculating their positions. What Wickham did not realize was that the Filipino delegation had anticipated this dynamic. Their strategy relied on linguistic discipline. Every word was chosen to lock in flexibility for them and constraint for others. The so-called unsophisticated English was deliberate, rooted in international treaty language, not conversational British norms. The collapse began with a single clause on dispute resolution. Wickham dismissed the Filipino wording as awkward and pushed for a cleaner British formulation. His version shifted jurisdiction subtly but decisively. De la Cruz paused, then requested recess. It was granted. For the first time, the Filipino team left the room without explanation. During that recess, messages were sent to regional partners, legal advisors, and private stakeholders. The Filipino delegation confirmed something critical. Without their preferred wording, the agreement exposed them to future arbitration risks. The cost was unacceptable. They returned to the table with a decision already made. De la Cruz spoke slowly. He said they could not proceed under the revised language. Whitcomb laughed, assuming posturing. He replied that they were discussing grammar. De la Cruz corrected him. They were discussing sovereignty. The word landed heavily. Other delegations shifted. This was no longer about English fluency. It was about power misread. Whitcomb attempted to recover, offering compromise. But the Filipino team remained firm. They cited international precedents, cases argued in English courts, rulings written in British legal English. Each reference was precise. Each dismantled the assumption that linguistic authority belonged to one side alone. As hours passed, support quietly moved. Smaller nations aligned with the Filipino position, wary of similar treatment. What Whitcomb had framed as linguistic superiority now looked like cultural arrogance. The chair called for an adjournment. The agreement was suspended pending review. In diplomatic terms, suspension is failure without the word. British stakeholders reacted immediately. Markets adjusted. Media inquiries followed. Whitcomb filed internal reports attributing the breakdown to communication inefficiencies. But transcripts told another story, one of dismissal, tone, and a fatal underestimation of a counterpart's command of language. Within days, an alternative framework emerged, excluding British leadership. The Philippines partnered with other stakeholders willing to accept their original language. The project moved forward, slower but on their terms. Whitcomb's delegation was sidelined, invited only as observers. Privately, British officials acknowledged the misstep. Not the joke, not the accent, the assumption that English belongs to those born closest to its origin. In reality, English had evolved, shaped by law, trade, and nations who learned to wield it not as identity, but as instrument. For the Filipino delegation, the outcome was not celebrated publicly. Diplomacy rarely is. But internally, it was seen as validation. Their English, often mocked online, questioned abroad, had held under pressure. It had protected national interests where confidence alone could not. Whitcomb's career did not end, but it stalled. Future postings were quieter. His name became a case study in diplomatic training modules, never officially, but in whispered examples. A reminder that tone can cost treaties and language arrogance can collapse negotiations faster than open hostility. This story is fictional, but its dynamics are real. English today is a global tool, not a native monopoly. In diplomacy, the most dangerous mistake is mistaking accent for intellect or fluency for control. Power listens carefully. Arrogance interrupts. In negotiation rooms around the world, similar moments pass unnoticed. A laugh, a correction, a word dismissed as clumsy. But for those on the receiving end, memory is long. Strategy adapts. And consequences unfold quietly months later when leverage shifts. The Filipino delegation understood something fundamental. You do not need to sound like authority to exercise it. You need preparation, restraint, and the patience to let others reveal their assumptions. Language, when mastered this way, becomes defense. For viewers watching this reconstruction, the lesson is not about English proficiency. It is about respect in asymmetrical spaces, about how underdogs survive elite rooms, not by matching confidence, but by outlasting it. Because in high-stakes diplomacy, words are never just words. They are contracts. They are future headlines. They are leverage disguised as grammar. And sometimes, the negotiation does not collapse because one side was weak, but because the other mistook silence for ignorance. When the room finally empties and the transcripts are filed away, history does not remember the accent. It remembers the outcome. The agreement that failed in Geneva succeeded elsewhere under different leadership, written in English that sounded unfamiliar, but proved unbreakable. For those who still believe power speaks with a single accent, this story offers a quiet correction. In the global arena, the most dangerous words are not spoken poorly, but underestimated.